Hey YouTube, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. And today we're talking about the Oregon Ducks and their football program, as they just recently made a new hire. Wide receiver coach Junior Adams moved on to the NFL. He went and joined the Dallas Cowboys, and Dan Lanning had to go make a hire, and they got Syracuse's Ross Douglas for the new wide receiver coach. I want to talk about what Douglas brings to the table, but also what this means for the rest of the coaching staff, as there is one main thing we're going to hit on later on in the video. But for now, let's talk about Ross Douglas and the impact that he brings to Oregon football in 2025. So as we mentioned, Ross Douglas, he's coming from Syracuse, as he spent one season there as the wide receiver coach in 2024. And before he got there, Syracuse wide receivers were not very productive, and Douglas changed that in a big way. Syracuse led the entire nation in passing yards per game, passing efficiency, led by quarterback Kyle McCord, but his receivers were getting open a lot better than they were in 2023. And that's a big credit to Ross Douglas, as he is a very promising young coach coming up in the industry. You talk to any coach on Syracuse or any coach that he's been with, they'll say the same thing. He is an Ohio native. He played college football at Michigan and Rutgers before going undrafted in the NFL. He then became a grad assistant at Rutgers, where he played, and then he became a wide receiver coach and defensive quality coach for the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick. 2023 became the full-time wide receiver coach, and then 2024, as we mentioned, he went to Syracuse. 2025, he's now at Oregon under head coach Dan Lanning. He's an Ohio native, so you have to have some assumption that he's going to bring a recruiting presence in the state of Ohio. I'm sure he has a lot of connections there, but also we've seen Dan Lanning go after guys that he knows can recruit nationally. I fully expect that to happen, especially with the success that Oregon's been having on the football field. But Douglas's number one job, in my opinion, will be roster retention. They got the number one wide receiver in the class of 2025, DeCorian Moore. His number one priority should be retaining him throughout the spring, after the spring, and I fully expect him to do so. Now, what I mentioned at the beginning was there's another domino that's fallen due to Douglas getting the wide receiver position. And that domino is many Oregon fans thinking that Rashad Samples was going to get the wide receiver coaching job and then also get the title as co-offensive coordinator. Obviously, that did not happen. Now the number one priority for Dan Lanning will probably be retaining Coach Samples. As we mentioned, DeCorian Moore, a big reason he committed to Oregon was Coach Samples, if not the biggest. Samples is from Texas. He has a lot of ties to Texas. And with all that being said, I think this is also a credit to Coach Lanning and Coach Douglas, as obviously there's a big trust there. If you're going to bring in Douglas over Coach Samples and keep Samples at running back, I think that speaks volumes to the type of coach that Coach Lanning thinks Douglas is. You don't go out and get an entirely new wide receiver coach if you think you can promote within, which many Oregon fans thought Dan Lanning would do. But he went out and got Ross Douglas. Now his number one job is to keep Samples on board, and if he does that, I think it's a win-win for everyone. I also expect Coach Samples to get the co-offensive coordinator job and a huge pay raise. And Coach Samples, he definitely deserves a pay raise. I mean, he did a tremendous job with our running backs last year. And he also did a tremendous job recruiting for the 2025 class. And he's also gotten off to a great start in the 2026 class as well. I think it's also important to note that Coach Samples and Coach Douglas together is going to create an incredible recruiting duo. Right now, Oregon has the number one class in 2026, and the headliner is Kendra Harrison, the number one tight end / number one athlete. But Coach Samples already got the number 3 running back in the composite, Tredarian Ball, committed. He is from Texarkana, Texas, and as you can see, Coach Samples was the primary recruiter there, and Texas also had some crystal balls. So Oregon went to Texas, they beat him out for one of the best running backs in the class, but also Coach Samples has them in the running for Deshaun Rideau, the number 9 running back in the class. And now Coach Douglas is coming in to a recruitment that might be the most intriguing recruitment left on the board for Oregon. That's Chris Henry Jr. He's coming into Ohio State, the number one wide receiver in the class of 2026. And when Junior Adams left, many people thought Oregon was going to probably be out of the race for Chris Henry. Myself and a lot of other fans of Oregon, a lot of people that are around the program, don't think that's the case whatsoever. They even think their chances are the same or could be better down the road. And I say that because I anticipate the full court press to be on. Oregon is not going after very many wide receivers in the class of 2026. I think they're going after quality instead of quantity. So you have Chris Henry Jr. there that I fully expect Coach Samples and Coach Douglas, the tag team, and I know Coach Lanning, Coach Will Stein, they're all on board there. This is a full staff effort. But also you have Jabari Brady, and as we mentioned, Coach Douglas, I anticipate he's going to be a national recruiter. I think it's pretty fair to say a guy from Ohio that's coached in New York, obviously played at Rutgers as well, went to Michigan, and now he's at Oregon. I fully anticipate he's going to have connections in a lot of places. I think he's going to see that Jabari Brady is a big time target on the board for Oregon. The Ducks may be on the outside looking in for Brady right now, but I fully expect them to put the full court press on here. As we mentioned, I think they're going to go for quality instead of quantity at the wide receiver position. And right now, Jabari Brady, he's one of the best receivers in the class. He currently has 37 offers. And then the big fish out there is the #1 quarterback, the #2 player in the country, Jared Curtis. And right now, it's looking like an Oregon-Georgia battle for him. He was a one-time Georgia commit. South Carolina is obviously in there as well. But Curtis has said multiple times that Oregon was leading or near the #1 spot in its recruitment, and a lot of that is because Dan Lanning and Will Stein have constantly visited him, and they are leading this recruitment. Dan Lanning leading the charge here, but this goes right back to the first point I made. I think Coach Douglas and Coach Samples are going to tag team a lot of guys, but also join in with Dan Lanning on some of their top targets, and I fully expect Jared Curtis to be one of those guys. And Coach Douglas is only going to help add to this 2026 class that Oregon currently sits at #1 in. To end the video, I just wanted to read this quote that Syracuse's head coach said when he hired Douglas a year ago. He said, "Ross is one of the young, bright minds in football. He'll be a great head coach one day. I'm happy we got him. Of the people we looked at, he was the best fit. He has it all. He understands and knows football. He's worked with arguably the best coach in football, and Coach Belichick said nothing but great things about him. To be able to get someone on our staff from Bill Belichick's staff alone is something I'm excited about." So based off that quote, it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the video. A lot of coaches speak highly of Douglas, and I think it says something of Dan Lanning out of all the options he had. He even recently went to a clinic with thousands of coaches over like 3 days. He saw tons of coaches, and he chose Ross Douglas. I think that needs to be emphasized in his selection of wide receiver coach, that he went out and chose Ross Douglas over many other candidates. Even if guys said no, he still thought Douglas was a good fit. I think Oregon fans should be pretty happy. With that, Oregon fans down below, let me know what you guys think of the hire and what you expect from Douglas both on the recruiting trail and on the field on Saturdays. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And with that, I'll see you on the next video.